Broadcasting live from the Business RadioX studios in Atlanta, Georgia, it's time for Association Leadership Radio. Now, here's your host.
Lee Cantor here, another episode of Association Leadership Radio, and this is going to be a good one. Today on the show, we have Jon Bassford, and he is with Lateral Solutions. Welcome, Jon.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Well, I'm excited to learn what you're up to. Tell us a little bit about Lateral Solutions. How are you helping folks?
Sure. So it is a operations management company, and what we do is launch internal operations for startups, nonprofits, for-profits, and really help them create streamlined, efficient, and effective internal operations. And then it can also provide ongoing management through bookkeeping, HR services, as well as COO and CFO level strategy. So
what's your backstory? How'd you get involved in operations?
Well, so I got started in associations as a whole, not like a lot of people, not necessarily intentionally. I went to law school, and I am one of those people who was leaving law school and did not know what I wanted to do with my law degree and with my life. And I started working for a legal organization I was a member of in law school. And that launched my career in association management. And when I was, as my position grew at that organization, I took on a lot of operational duties and responsibilities, even though it wasn't my core job. And when I was ready to move on and go to the next position, I focused my search on internal operations and have built a career around it.
Now, having, I guess, worked with a lot of different types of organizations, do you see kind of similar challenges that maybe a non-association firm would have, but an association firm doesn't have, and vice versa?
I'd say that for the most part, the only major difference is taxes, right? Which a nonprofit doesn't pay taxes, unless there's some not to say that never occurs with different business lines for an association, but for the most part, that's the difference. At the end of the day, everyone is trying to deliver on their end goal, whether it's to sell a product or deliver on their mission. And they're trying to do that the best way possible with the resources they have. At the end of the day, that's what every company, whether for-profit or not-profit, is trying to do from a business operations standpoint.
Now, when you started getting into operations, was that something like you said it wasn't kind of your initial goal, but you got into it? What made you think you were good at it? Like, what were some of the clues that you had where you're like, hey, you know what? I can really make a difference in an organization by becoming kind of a ninja in this space?
Yeah, a couple things. One being, I am probably the definition of jack of all trades, master of none. Throughout my career, I have been involved in marketing. I have been involved in budgeting and finance. I have been involved in HR, legal, event management, programmatic management, volunteer management, and operations is really, to some degree, where all that comes together. And working for small organizations and small companies, it really allows me to utilize my diverse set of skills. Again, I have a law degree, but I'm not a practicing attorney. I have an MBA, but I'm not a CPA. But I really have a broad knowledge in all of these areas and really have able to hone those. The other part of the operations is that, it takes, I think, a person who has problem-solving skills and an analytical mind. And I think those are two areas where I really excel throughout my career and in my life.
Now, is there any kind of actionable thing an association leader right now, while listening to you and your background about operations, is there something they can do today that can help make their life easier?
Yeah, I think this is true for all companies, but I think it's even more true for associations. And my answer is to question everything. The reason why I say that's even more true for associations is because of the longevity that associations tend to have with their staff and being mission driven. And, everyone who works for or is involved in that organization loves and cares about what that organization does. they tend to fall in the trap of doing the same thing over and over again. And we've all heard it before, like, why do you do X? Well, it's the way we've always done it. And I think the biggest thing for association leaders to change with the times, whether digitally, staff culture, whatever it may be, is to really question what it is you do and why you do it. And I think nothing should be left on the table. I think you should question everything. Obviously, I'm not suggesting that you review your mission every week. That's certainly done at the governance and board level. But your day-to-day transactional work and your tactics and why you're doing it, questioning why you're doing it, how you're doing it, and whether or not it's delivering the results that you intend.
Now, do you find that folks are hesitant to do that kind of an audit because they're kind of afraid of what they might find? And when you're bringing up these points where, hey, you know what, we've always done it this way. This is how it was done before I even got here. So why question, if it isn't broken, why fix it? And people not realizing that sometimes you should be breaking some things because they have kind of lived the usefulness.
Yeah. That's a good question, and obviously we're talking broad here, so it's always tough to kind of maybe narrow down some specifics. But here's one example, just how life and the digital world and everything has changed. A colleague of mine who is a very similar job as a director of operations for a quasi-governmental organization, and operates as a nonprofit association, if you will, to a certain degree, but gets funding from the government. And she runs payroll for 30 people, and she spends 2 to 4 days a month entering, journalizing, reconciling with benefits. She spends 2 to 4 days a month on payroll. Where currently right now, I handle payroll for 5 companies myself personally, not outsource anybody else. I personally run payroll for 5 companies. I spend less than 15 minutes a month on all 5 combined, not per payroll, not per company, combined. And the reason is because I've stayed out there and watched and listened to what new strategies, what new platforms are out there, so we can streamline the process. And again, I realize that this is one tiny little piece of the pie, but just think if an organization could get back 2 to 4 days a month of someone's time, what much more could you do with that time and that money than having them sit there and enter manual payroll? And I think that can apply to a lot of areas, whether your marketing strategies are old school or your HR strategies, right? Are you a company that still has a very manufacturer based PTO policy, and is that the best time to be using your staff's time and counting hours and booking PTO and someone on the back end managing all that? Or is it time to go to a more modern tactic and strategy with that and have an unlimited PTO policy? So there's a lot of different ways, that I think leaders need to be looking at. Are they using the most up-to-date technologies and strategies? And therefore, are they being as efficient and as effective as possible? And that's the bottom line that they're trying to get to.
Right. And I think this is where having an outside person come in and shed some light to this is really important, because the people in the organization just don't know what they don't know. And you need to have somebody with fresh eyes, especially that has deep depth of knowledge of some of these areas, to be able to say, hey, you know what? There's a better way. And it's not as scary or as hard as you think it might be to make this kind of a change. And the benefits can be dramatic. And especially like you're saying, a day or two here, a day or two there, it doesn't matter. It seems minimal for the cost of change, but those things add up. A day here, a day there becomes a week here and a week there pretty quickly.
Yeah. And another, going back to your question about a difference between, the for-profit, nonprofit world, I think another area that I see a big difference between my for-profit and nonprofit clients is outsourcing. I think most associations, they tend to figure out the skill sets they need, and build an entire team internally around that. And by no means is that for me to say that's a good or bad strategy, but what it does tend to lend itself to is having people performing duties that they don't have an expertise in. Whereas when you take a for-profit startup, that's just as lean, just as trying to scale and do the most it can with limited resources, like most associations are. They're outsourcing majority of their stuff, and what they can do by that is reduce their costs a lot of times because you're not paying for that 9-to-5 job and the benefits. But what they get instead is expertise in every single little area. If they have a campaign that is direct mail, they hire a direct mail person. They have a campaign that's social media, they hire a social media person. Whereas you take your normal association and it is one person who does all the marketing and all the communications across the entire organization. And if it's not a specific area of expertise for them, they just kind of have to figure it out. And again, I came up that way in my career, and it served me well. But at a certain point, our organizations getting the amount of expertise and skill they need for the amount they're spending.
Now, can you share a story maybe where an organization was struggling and you came in and helped them maybe get to a new level, a level that maybe they didn't even imagine was possible? You don't have to name the organization, but just share kind of the pain they were having and how you were able to intervene and help them.
Sure. So, I've a lot of my clients when I moved to the consulting side, again, it's been on the operations front. A lot of that has to do with organizations that are completely startup, even for a nonprofit. At some point they got to start from the ground up, or an organization that was incubated under some kind of fund and now is branching off. And that's actually where I've had a number of my nonprofit clients in the last 3 years. And a lot of that has to do with, again, kind of going back to this area of expertise. Most day-to-day functioning business people or operators, again, whether you're executive director for a for-profit or nonprofit, or you're a CEO for nonprofit, they don't know the ins and outs and minutia of interoperations. It's not rocket science. People can figure that out. But often it's something that needs to be ramped up quick. You don't have time to figure that out, right? You don't. There's only so many mistakes that you can make on accounting before it affects your taxes. There's only so many mistakes you can make on an HR front and until you get sued. And on top of that, do you know what insurance you need, right? So a lot of my clients have come to me and said, hey, we've incorporated, or we've branched off from this, or we've done, we got to this point, but we have no idea where to go next. And what my company tends to do is to say, as a one-stop shop, come in and say, we will do all of the internal operations and administrative functions that you need to take this from, just a project or idea, and turn it into a company. Because nonprofits and associations, they are companies, they are incorporated, and they need to make sure that the operational processes and procedures that they're putting forth are in compliance with local and federal laws and regulations, and really making sure that they are following the best industry standards in those areas. Because whether you are a for-profit or nonprofit, accounting is accounting for the most part, other than taxes. HR is HR, legal is legal, insurance is insurance for the most part. And you got to make sure that you're working with a partner that knows those areas to make sure that you're doing this right. Because here's what ends up happening. A lot of people convince themselves that they know enough or they care enough about the internal operations matters that they're going to stay on top of it. And I can't tell you the number of times that I've been brought into a situation where books have not been reconciled for a year, or, having a client that doesn't want to pay my company to do certain aspects. And so we don't. But then we handle, the reconciliation of their books or something down the line. And the amount of money that they spent for us to clean up their books and to make things right is what they would have spent. They would have had us do the entire thing all along and give themselves back that time and money.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you're coming in to fix a problem that could have been prevented in the first place.
Right. And a lot of times without any additional cost. Usually, for example, when I first started out consulting, I had just a few small clients. I think at the time I had 5 clients, and it was just me at the time. And the one person who did not want me to do their accounts payable, I would spend more time reconciling their books than the other 4 clients combined.
Right. It's because if the system isn't good, then the output of information is not going to be good. So
Correct.
Now, when you're working with a new client, what is typically the pain? Are they in some sort of a crisis? Has something happened where they're like, hey, we better call John and his team because, we screwed this up, or something, something isn't, I'm feeling some sort of a pain. Are you coming in that kind of regard, or are people proactive in trying to get ahead of things?
So because a lot of my work has begun at the startup phase, again, whether it's true startup from nothing or branching off, the pain point is we're incorporated and we don't know what to go do from here. Right. And so that's certainly a big pain point that I'm feeling is providing that expertise on all those different aspects that you need to set up and start running. The other part, I would say, more than any other area where the pain points become visible to the executive director or the owner, et cetera, is around accounting. HR, you can kind of fake it till there's a problem, right? Business insurance, you don't know that there is a problem till there is a problem, right? You don't sit around thinking, oh man, do I have enough insurance? But the accounting is something that is going to pop up all the time. Whether it's you're doing the finances for a board meeting, you are getting ready for taxes, you are, just trying to get to a point where you're reviewing your own financial reports on a regular basis. There's several different flows of information that occur with accounting that at some point you're going to be like, oh, like this isn't right, and I don't know how to fix this. And it's usually because there aren't the systems and processes in place. And, as much people are good intentioned on staying on top of accounting, it's an area that slides because it's not an area of competency. And for most people, it's not fun, right? It's not what they enjoy doing. It's not their core mission. It's not their core business. And they tend to let it slide. So a lot of times we are brought in to say, come in and say, hey, like something is off on our books and we don't know what it is. Can you come help us find it?
And then, so when you start an engagement, you're coming in to maybe solve a specific problem like that or build a strong foundation. Is it something that you're coming in to just kind of triage that situation, or does this eventually turn into hey, I might as well just outsource this to John because he seems to know what he's doing?
We occasionally do ad hoc work for problem solving. And I'd say that happens more on the association side for me more than anything. It probably happens a little more outside the outskirts of operations. One of my clients is redoing their component relations handbook for their professional chapters across the country, and just one of those things that again it just falls to the wayside because it's not the core job of the individuals, and so it just sits, and they've engaged me to say, hey, look, we need to revamp this, and we want your skill and expertise on how to do that. So we certainly do that ad hoc work. But my goal is always with clients is to get my foot in the door with some kind of project, and then from there provide ongoing services. Whether and sometimes it's just from an advisory standpoint, right? Maybe you have that person at your office, that the EA or the operations manager who handles all the transactional day-to-day work. They make sure the bookkeeping is done. They make sure there's business insurance. They respond to the emails and the inquiries when they come in. But maybe they don't have that high level view and experience on some of these areas. Where again, that's an area where I can come in as a a COO or CFO advisor and really just kind of help quarterback the person, right? They can handle the transaction work, they can handle the day-to-day, but I can come in and provide them with a little bit more expertise and helping make sure in a limited number of hours, 5 or 10 hours a month, making sure that organization is getting ahead of the future hurdles and making sure that they don't get in that same place again.
Yeah, a strong foundation is critical, and just even like you said earlier, little tweaks can have a big impact over time. So get some of this stuff right at jump rather than, kind of just accept certain levels of inefficiencies when you don't have to.
Yeah, and I have a great story. It's not operations; it's from my very first role. But again, I think it kind of goes to a little bit of what we've been talking about with associations and change, associations and evaluation, and also the end goal of making sure that what you're doing on a day-to-day basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, is driving the results that you intend. So I started my new job with this legal organization, and I'd done a trip. It was a traveling field rep position where I was going around the country visiting chapters at law schools and helping the ones that were struggling by training the officers, doing recruitment for them, and really just kind of being that in the field person to help these chapters grow and succeed. And I'd finished my first training trip with a colleague, and I was a couple of weeks in, and I kept being told by my boss, this is what we expect our chapters to do. It was very, very specific, right? These number of programs, this number of recruiting events, they need to have an initiation every semester, or at least once a year, very, very specific requirements. And, I'm here, I'm training, I'm the new guy. And again, my mind is analytical. I'm always thinking about what's best and how things should work. And so I come to him and I said, you keep telling me that this is what chapters should do. Where does that exist? Where are we telling the chapters that, other than me repeating the words? The answer was, there's this document in the back of the district conference manual. So I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, okay, it's in the back of this manual. I said, so what happens if a chapter doesn't come to district conference? Do they see this document ever? No. Well, what if they leave their manual at the district conference and leave and go home? Will they see this again? The answer was no. So this entire organization's chapter operations is really what its mission is all about. These chapters deliver on the organization's mission, which is the sole purpose of the organization. And the chapters doing these tasks, on a semester annual basis is the whole point of what they're doing to fulfill on that mission. And that instruction was buried in the back of a manual. So here's what I did. Again, I didn't make broad changes. I didn't reinvent the wheel, but I took these pages. I think at the time it was 3 pages, and I boiled it down to a 2-page document, front and back for printed out, and 2 pages for digital. And I had that document be at the front of every single thing I did. If I was emailing a chapter about initiation, I mentioned this document. If I was emailing them about programming, I mentioned this document. Everything I did was geared around this document. And because of this kind of proactive approach of really putting out all the expectations on the chapters up front, in my time there, I was there for 6 years. During my time there, the organization, which was a 100-year-old organization, so it wasn't new, like it wasn't in a growth phase. In the law school department, we had a 20% increase in membership. We had probably, it's sometimes hard to quantify, but a 2-3x times in programming from our chapters. We went from having about 15 chapters out of 200 meeting these minimal expectations to over 100. So really increasing that greatly. And here's another big thing that with utilizing this document and laying out expectations and communicating it proactively, the organization had an issue where they a lot of times would have to subsidize people to go to their conventions to get the numbers that they wanted. And what we were able to do during my tenure is not only cut out those subsidies, we actually increased the convention attendance year after year while I was there. And it was all because of utilizing this document, being proactive about it, laying out clear expectations for these chapters, and communicating it proactively as well.
Wow, that is a great story. And that shows being proactive on your part enabled your client to really benefit and really just, they're probably benefiting to this day.
Yeah, I mean, and there's no doubt that some of my bosses and people I worked with had started this process, right? Like the organization was in a place of change. It had transitioned, I think, 5 or 7 years prior to a volunteer alumnus kind of being the executive director of the organization to paid staff. So it had made some changes already. And it was certainly growing and making some progress. But again, this one little tweak, one little change of pulling this document out and really driving it home really made all the difference for that organization. They also started doing it more in that pre-law department. They started seeing growth there. And there's no doubt that I was piggybacking on some of the great changes that happened before me. And I'm sure that the people following me took what I did and have made it even continue to use the core of it, but are continue to grow and expand that as well.
Well, Jon, if somebody wants to learn more, have a more substantive conversation with you or somebody on your team, what's the website?
Yeah, you can go to www.think-lateral.com.
Think, and then the hyphen lateral.com.
Correct. Yep.
Well, Jon, thank you so much for sharing your story today. You're doing important work, and we appreciate you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it as well.
All right, this is Lee Cantor. We'll see y'all next time on Association Leadership Radio.